Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, 2020 Minnesota Labor Market and Career Trends. My name is Rebecca Luberg. I'm the Director of Career and Business Engagement with the University of Minnesota Alumni Association, and I'm here with Tim O'Neill from DEED, and we'll get a little bit more into this introduction in just a few. So today's webinar has been brought to you by today's webinar series has been brought to you by alumni who make this webinar possible, our members of the University of Minnesota Alumni Association. So thank you for your membership. If you're interested in joining and becoming a member of the University of Minnesota Alumni Association, please go to umn.alumni.org. As many of you may know, February is Career Month, and there are a number of upcoming webinars. As you can see on your screen, we have a few coming up in the next few weeks. Please join us at these webinars. We also have a number of networking events. Some of those networking events are both local, national, and international opportunities to connect with alumni. As you can see here, we have one that's a little bit bolder and highlighted than others. It's called Minnesota Career Connections. The theme of that is setting your career intention, and that is a networking event that will be happening here in McNamara. And that event will be from 5 to 7 p.m. The goal of that event is to connect with alumni and professionals across all industries. It is open to the public. And so to find more information about that, you may go to umnalumni.org/careermonth. Here's just some general housekeeping information. If you'd like to listen via phone, you may dial the number that's on the screen. You can also see a webinar ID present as well. In addition, you may ask questions at any time, and we'll try to get to your questions throughout the webinar. We'll also have an opportunity at the end of the webinar for questions as well. So to get us started, I'd like to formally introduce Timothy O'Neill. Timothy is DEED's regional analyst for the 7-county Twin Cities region of Minnesota. He focuses on labor force and industry trends, regional demographics, hiring demands, and educational outcomes. He has a bachelor's degree in history and political science from St. Olaf College in Northfield, and has a master's degree in public policy from the Humphrey School of Public Affairs at the University of Minnesota. And I will let Tim take it from here.
Hey everybody, my name is Tim O'Neill again. It's kind of a habit of just introducing myself again right after introductions. But yes, I do work for the Minnesota Department of Employment and Economic Development. And specifically within the Labor Market Information Office. And so if you're not familiar with our office, we actually collect quite a bit of information. As you can see here too, kind of backing up, DEED also does a lot beyond the data that we collect within the labor market information. And so if you're interested in any sort of business recruitment, expansion, retention, international trade, workforce development, or community development, DEED does have resources such as the workforce strategy consultants. So if you are a business in this tight labor market and you're looking for workers and you just can't find those workers, those workforce strategy consultants can help out with creative solutions to figure out, what have we been doing? What are the strengths that we have? What haven't we been doing? What are some solutions that we can look into to being successful within the state of Minnesota, wherever you're located, whether it's in the metro area or greater Minnesota. We also have folks like the business development managers, which can help out with if you're looking to expand or relocate as a business in the state of Minnesota, or if you're looking to start up your own business. So if there's any entrepreneurs out there that are listening, maybe you don't know about the red tape or some grants that might be available, that you can reach out to these business development managers, get their insights, get their help with starting up your own business, expanding or relocating within the state of Minnesota. So there's a lot of resources. And hopefully you guys can hear me. Let Rebecca know anytime if you have questions or if you can't hear me or anything like that, kind of the logistics. So let her know about that. But yeah, there's a lot of resources through the department that a lot of people just don't know about. So definitely reach out to myself or anybody within the Department of Employment and Economic Development if you need any sort of help with any of this, whether it's career information and career exploration, business information, community development, workforce development, all that kind of stuff. So DEED is huge, it's about 1,400 people, but the Labor Market Information Office, the office that I work within, we're actually a pretty small office. We're about 25 folks, that we work in tandem with the Bureau of Labor Statistics, part of the US Department of Labor. And we collect all that information on that middle bullet point here that you see in this slide. And so usually when I present, I'm presenting, I can see the audience. So this is a little bit new for me, but I'll usually kind of do a hand poll for how many people here actually keep up with the monthly employment releases through the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And usually in an audience, let's say it's about 50 people, I might get 1 or 2 hands. But it's actually really, if you dig into it, exciting stuff. I know numbers and data, and there's gonna be a lot of data coming up here, so get excited. I know sometimes it's not the most exciting stuff in the world. It's pretty dry. It's just, what am I gonna do with this information? It's almost overwhelming how much data there is out there. But when you're looking through these monthly employment releases, and they typically come out, you know, the first week of the month for the national level, and about 2 or 3 weeks later for the state level and community levels within, you know, for the state of Minnesota. When you're digging into those numbers, whether it's industry trends or unemployment trends or what's going on with wages, I think that's where this information can get really interesting. And so yes, we do collect that unemployment rate. We collect, you know, what industries are growing the most, which ones are declining over the month or over the past year. We can look into projections. So let's say that you're considering going for a new degree. Is that occupation or industry, is it going to be in demand? Is it going to be growing when I'm done with that degree in the future? We also have job vacancy information. So are these jobs in demand today? What are the wages? What kind of education do I need to go for these different occupations? And so we just have a lot of information, whether, again, you're doing career exploration, or if you're looking to get a better sense about what is your community like. And so with that in mind, beyond the employment data, beyond unemployment, beyond industry trends, things like that, I also help out with demographic information. And of course, reach out to resources like Minnesota State Demographic Center, the American Community Survey through the Census Bureau. Minnesota Compass has a lot of great information too, where they package it really well. So if you want to look at specific communities or neighborhoods, Minnesota Compass is a great resource as well. But I'm also here to help out. And so I describe my job, I should kind of go back to my introduction here. As a regional labor market analyst, I cover Anoka, Carver, Dakota, Hennepin, Ramsey, Scott, and Washington counties, so the 7-county metro area. There are other regional analysts throughout the state of Minnesota. So you can, if you're living in Duluth, reach out to the Northeast regional analyst or anywhere in the north, the Arrowhead region. We have a Northwest regional analyst based out of Brainerd, Minnesota. We have a Central regional analyst based out of St. Cloud, Minnesota. And then we also have a Southeast regional analyst based out of Mankato. And so you can reach out to any of those regional analysts, and I'll have my contact information in these PowerPoint slides. And yes, you can, if you want to, check out these slides for fun. The weekend's coming up. So you can do this presentation for your family and friends if you want to, or just look into these slides more in depth because there's a lot of information. But yeah, my contact information will be there, so you can reach out to me anytime. And then I can put you in contact with any of the other regional analysts or myself if you need any more information. With that being said, you see that last bullet point on this slide. That's what labor market information is all about, making better, more informed, market responsive decisions. And so let's say you're a student. Let's say you're about to graduate from the University of Minnesota and you're trying to figure out what are those occupations that are out there that are in demand? What are the wages? Will I be able to support myself and my family? With these wages. So what's the cost of living? We can help with the data, try to figure out those most appropriate pathways for you. We can also look into career assessments, interest assessments, and skills assessments to see what do you like, what do you not like. Audiences could also be just job seekers in general. If you're looking for that job today, or if you're looking for a career pathway down the line, we've got information that can help out with that. If you're a legislator, or if you're an economic development agency, or if you're a city or a county government, we've got information that can help out with, again, figuring out what is happening in your communities. Is it growing? Is it declining? What populations are growing or declining? What's going on with educational attainment? What's going on with commuting patterns? What's going on with industry trends and business growth? And so we have a lot of audiences. Almost anybody that's interested in job information, what's going on with the economy and the labor market, you can look into our data. And the cool thing about it is it's all free and open to the public. I think I described my job. I did a presentation this morning to a healthcare panel, so sorry if I start to duplicate myself, but I do describe my job as doing homework for others free of charge. So reach out if you need any information at all, whether it's that quick statistic, such as what's the unemployment rate in my local area, or if you want a customized report, or if you want a presentation yourself, I'm happy to help out with whatever type of information or endeavors that you're looking into. Okay, so that's kind of the introduction. Moving forward, I think with every presentation that I do, and if you've heard me present before, I apologize. I do a lot of the same jokes all the time, and a lot of the information that I'll say is it's going to be pretty repetitious. But one of the cool things about, again, labor market information is that the data is constantly updated. There's always going to be new trends. There's always going to be kind of these new hot topics that you can start to dig yourselves into. For instance, I would say within the past year of being a regional analyst, and I've been one for about 7 years, career pathways has definitely been the biggest topic that I've seen within the past year, within the past 6 months. It's really eye-opening just to see, what our K-12 institutions doing, so high schools, how are they reaching out to post-secondary institutions? What's the relationship like there? Or employers reaching out to post-secondary institutions. So what's the relationship like there in this tight labor market? And so it's just really eye-opening to see those relationships start to expand, start to get stronger. And looking into career pathways, that's one of the things where, again, K-12, post-secondary, businesses, job seekers, state government, local government, that's where all these players are starting to get together at the same table and have these conversations about Minnesota. We're dealing with a tight labor market. How can we continue to grow? How can we have those efficient pipelines for students, for job seekers, so that they can be successful too, so that everybody can just be successful within the state of Minnesota. So that's where labor market information can kind of be a helping hand within those conversations with the data. And so that's, I think, where, the information when we're looking at these slides going forward, it is going to be a lot of numbers, tables, charts, figures. So get ready for that. But it's when you start to dig into the labor market information and realize these stories that are behind the numbers. It's people, it's businesses, and then there's a lot of endeavors that are going on to try to help out these people and these businesses. So that's, again, where this stuff can get pretty powerful. Again, ask questions anytime. I think Rebecca's keeping an eye on the board if any questions come up. But with that, I'll get to the kind of guaranteed section, or if you have myself come in or any other labor market information analysts come in, they're probably going to give you a little bit of what is happening in the labor market. And so with the most recent employment release, and this is where I'll start to spit out those numbers at you guys. The most recent release for the United States was for January of 2020. And so this presentation was titled, 2020 in Minnesota's labor market. It is a little bit of a white lie, as when you're looking at labor market information, it is pretty historical in nature. Some of the most recent information that we can get is through a resource such as current employment statistics. And so with the US, we just came out with January 2020 data. Minnesota January 2020 data will be released in March. I think it's March 16th. And then about 1 week later, we'll release February data. So we're kind of in that funky time period with labor market releases where we are revising a lot of the data. So keep that in mind when you're looking at labor market data and information. Look at the methodology. Where's this information coming from? Is it from surveys? Is it from censuses, administrative data? What time period are we looking at? And so there can be pros and cons to all these different data tools that we have. Each of these tools on their own brings forth its own strengths, but I think it's when you start to look at all these tools in concert with one another, which I'll start to do going forward, that's where you can really come up with these stories and figure out what is happening in the state of Minnesota. What's going on with education? What's going on with different industries? What's going on with different occupations? That's something to keep an eye on. The methodology, where's the data coming from? So with the US, as of January of 2020, the US gained 225,000 jobs. So that sounds like a lot of jobs, but when you're looking at historical trends, one of the summaries of this slide is, and you'll see that for Minnesota data too, we are starting to see some fluctuations. This is where I start to really sound like a labor market analyst. We are starting to see some fluctuations with employment growth. So for instance, in 2019, the US averaged about 175,000 jobs gained per month. In 2018, the year before, the US averaged 223,000 jobs gained per month. So we are seeing some slowing down, some fluctuations in terms of total job growth. In the state of Minnesota, as of December of 2019, the state of Minnesota gained 200 jobs. That doesn't sound like a lot of jobs, does it? We were pretty much flat over December of 2019. over that year from 2018 December to 2019 December, Minnesota gained about 4,000 jobs. That's where you start to look at historical trends too. So we're looking at long-term trends and short-term trends. When you're looking at long-term trends, Minnesota has gained about 350,000 jobs since the end of the Great Recession in September of 2009. So we are surpassing 10 years, going towards 11 years of total employment growth in the state of Minnesota. So that's definitely an indicator that's, wow, we're doing pretty well when we're looking at that long-term growth in the state of Minnesota and the United States. But yeah, when you're looking at the average then, we averaged about 35,000 jobs gained per year since 2009, or 3,000 jobs gained per month. So when you're looking at that 4,000 jobs gained over the past year, or 200 jobs gained over the month of December, that's where, yes, when we're looking at these short-term trends, we are seeing a much different picture now. We're seeing some fluctuations and some slowing down of employment growth across the state of Minnesota. And we'll get to some complexities when I'm talking about that going forward. There's kind of two main stories going on in the state of Minnesota. That's the first story. And I'll get to the second story in just a bit, but the first story is that we are seeing fluctuations in employment growth. So this is where we start to get into that more interesting data then, getting down to the education, looking at, everything from less than a high school diploma needed for jobs that are growing or that are in demand here in the state of Minnesota through advanced degrees. And so when we're looking at those industries that gain jobs over the year in the state of Minnesota, I could list them off. The number one, leisure and hospitality, gained over 14,000 jobs. Number two was trade and transportation, gained over 2,800 jobs. Then it was financial activities, other services, and government. So right off the bat, we can kind of tell what are those jobs that are growing the most in the state of Minnesota over the year. And then from there, you can get a sense of the occupations and the educational attainment that employers are going to be looking for within those jobs. So you can do that for the United States. You can zoom into the state of Minnesota. And the great thing I think about labor market information is that you can really zoom in on local areas. So the 7-county metro, Hennepin County, Ramsey County, Dakota. You can go into city levels, Minneapolis, St. Paul, or even neighborhood levels to see what's going on with growth there, what's going on with jobs and businesses. Getting to a couple more of the bullet points within the slides here. The big one, unemployment. So unemployment, that's probably our most popular data point. The media loves it, economists love it. It's a leading economic indicator. You can track it over time. The big story here, the summary here is that we have very low unemployment still in the state of Minnesota. It has ticked up a little bit. 2018 annual unemployment in the state of Minnesota was 2.8%. As of December of 2019, we're at 3.3%. So it has ticked up a little bit, but one of the really interesting things is, and we're actually kind of scratching our heads at this in our office, is that the labor force participation rate, that fourth bullet point there, that's also ticking up recently within the state of Minnesota. We are actually thinking this is going to be trending down going forward with the aging of our population, but it's actually ticked up in recent months. We're at 70.3%. And so that labor force participation, that includes both employed persons and unemployed persons. So it's kind of a hopefulness indicator in our labor market. It's either people that are working or they believe there are work opportunities out there for them, so they're looking for work. Fun fact, Minnesota has the nation's #1 highest labor force participation rate. Well, we actually we seesaw back and forth a little bit with North Dakota and some other surrounding Midwest states, but yeah, we're usually in the top 1, 2, or 3 for highest labor force participation rates, which is a really cool thing to see within our economy. We also have, I believe, as of 2018, we have the nation's #1 highest female labor force participation rate. Looks like we had a question. But yeah, so it's with that labor force participation rate going up, that's more people that are looking for work in the state of Minnesota. So that's probably one of the main reasons why our unemployment rate has been ticking up just a little bit. We're still, though, really low, 3.3%, which represents about 108,000 unemployed Minnesotans that are actively looking for work. So it looks like we had a question here. How does the labor market look for job seekers, specifically educated job seekers? So that's one of the tricky things. When you're looking at labor market information, we do have a lot of surveys. We have a lot of censuses again. And so when we're looking for that, I was just talking about unemployment data. One of the tricky things is kind of looking at, of those unemployed persons, what's the education that they have? What are the skills and experience that they have? Is it something that employers are going to be looking for? Can we find those jobs that are out there that are growing? Can we find that linkage between those unemployed persons and then the job opportunities? So that's definitely one of the biggest things when you're at those conversation tables, whether it's a workforce development board meeting, which are all open to the public, definitely check them out, or whether you're in K-12 institutions, post-secondary, just these conversations about what are the job opportunities that we have here? Those people that are looking for work in our communities, are there jobs for them right here in their own backyards? So that's where conversations then also delve into commuting patterns and transportation, childcare, affordable housing. All those are very important pieces of the puzzle. Our office just looks at kind of the economy labor force side. That's definitely a big part of the puzzle piece. But yeah, looking at education is definitely one of the biggest things beyond career pathways that I mentioned before. Education is another really hot topic that our office is really starting to take a hard look at. And so when we are looking at the education side of things, and I'll mention some of these tools later, but Graduate Employment Outcomes is a great resource that you can look into. The American Community Survey, getting a sense of, of those unemployed persons, what kind of education do they have? But you got to consider the flux of the labor market too. This data, as I mentioned before, is historical. The labor market is in constant motion. So we're constantly trying to keep an eye on and a tab on just what is the most recent data telling us and what do we expect going forward. And that actually brings up another important thing that our office is starting to look into. So stay tuned. I can't really talk about it too much with the data, as I actually haven't seen the specifics that much either. But we're looking at jobs going forward. How might they shift in terms of the education and the skills that employers are looking for, especially in terms of things like automation coming to the front, new technologies, new innovations. And this is across every industry sector, whether it's healthcare, manufacturing, professional business services, or educational services. How might these new technologies, automation impact these jobs? Will jobs disappear? Will jobs be created? What kind of skill sets? How will those shift going forward? And what kind of education, formal education, will I need for these jobs going forward? So that's definitely a very hot topic and something that we're keeping an eye on. So stay tuned and keep up with the labor market information as we go forward with those types of topics. Is this a question too? Question about implications of data. When you look at all the statistics as well as qualitative info about various communities, what do you think accounts for variations in community vitality? For example, why is the economy in Columbia Heights so sluggish, even though its location and the amount of traffic through it would suggest that employers could assess employees and customers from all around the metro area? Yeah, so that's definitely something, again, going to the strengths of labor market information, where you can really zoom in on local areas. And one of the interesting things here too, when I've done some recent analysis on growth in the metro area, Minneapolis is the largest employing city in the state of Minnesota. Hennepin County is the largest employing county in the state of Minnesota. If you head just a few miles east, we've got Ramsey County and then the city of St. Paul. And the growth, when you're looking at growth in Hennepin County versus Ramsey County, Minneapolis versus St. Paul, it's actually really eye-opening to see the differences in growth between those two counties, between those two cities, even though they're geographically right next to each other. You can also look at urban versus rural, emerging suburban areas, and it's also equally eye-opening to see the differences in, for instance, growth in Minneapolis, St. Paul versus those first ring suburbs versus outer ring suburbs, and then moving on into greater Minnesota. And sometimes it is tricky figuring out, why a community like St. Paul, the city of St. Paul, might be growing slower than a city like Minneapolis. You can start to look into, for instance, industry employment, seeing what are the differences between the businesses that are more concentrated in St. Paul versus Minneapolis. You could start to look at, commuting patterns, looking at traffic flows, seeing if there might be some complexities that are leading to different growth rates within those two cities. But it is something that, I would need to take more time. And that's where you can reach out to me or the Labor Market Information Office. Or if you're looking at specific cases, we can help you with the data and try to figure out why are we seeing those differences between those two communities in terms of growth. So that was a great question. I could spend a lot of time on that, but definitely reach out to me going forward, and I'll keep working with you on that question. Let's see if I forgot some fun facts here. I don't think so. So let's move on to the next slide. I've got like 30 slides I think I'm already like halfway through this presentation, so I should probably pick it up a little bit. But yeah, keep asking those questions if you have any. The thing here then, moving on past employment growth, one of the things I mentioned was there's two stories. One is that we are starting to see some fluctuations, that first part of the story. And I did mention the aging of the population, which is kind of what this slide is showing here in terms of labor force growth. Minnesota has seen dramatic slowing down of its labor force growth. So for instance, in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, the state added about 40,000 people per year to our labor market. Within the past decade, we added about, I got to look at my notes here. I was actually a history major, so I don't know why I do this job. It's a great job. But in the past decade, we added about 18,600 people per year. So dramatically slowing down from the previous decades. And then 2020 to 2030, we kind of combined some ACS data with Minnesota state demographic information. We anticipate the labor market in the state to grow by about 7,500 people per year. That's 0.2% average annual growth. And I don't know if you can really tell from that blue line there in terms of labor force growth, but we are starting to see some pretty significant slowing down. And a lot of that does have to do with the aging of the population. So it's in my introduction too. It's in the presentation description, but we are in uncharted territory. If I was to summarize everything I've said so far and everything I could present on, we are seeing some fluctuations. We're seeing record low unemployment. We're seeing record high vacancies in the state of Minnesota, an aging of the population. And then you can also look into increasing diversity, immigration, all of these things together. And that's where that uncharted territory comes into play. And so that's why, you know, questions like before where we're looking at different communities and why are we seeing different growth, that's where you can really take this information and zoom in on your area and see how it's unique and how can we continue to grow. And if I'm looking for a job, what might be those opportunities? And so that's where, you know, I try to summarize this stuff sometimes, and sometimes it can be pretty tricky with just how much information is out there. But yeah, I just wanted to back up some of that employment data that I was talking about. We have, this is kind of the bread and butter of our labor market information office, the quarterly census of employment and wages. So before all those numbers I was talking about, you know, Minnesota gained 200 jobs in December, 4,000 jobs over the year. The nation gained, what was it, 225,000 jobs in January. That's based off the current employment statistics survey. So now we're moving on to a census. So the cool thing about this, every employer in the state of Minnesota is required to report their employment and wages to our office. And so it's really great data, and that's where we're benchmarking that survey data to this type of data. This is kind of confusing because then I go right back to CES. But yeah, you could look at CES trends, that really up-to-date information. So you could look at the total economy, you can break it down for different industry sectors like healthcare, for instance. Seeing that healthcare has added about 10,000 jobs per year in the state of Minnesota over the past decade. So 100,000 jobs since 2000. You could look at manufacturing, much different story. Manufacturing lost 110,000 jobs between 2000 and 2010. It's added about 33,000 jobs, if I'm looking at my notes. 29,400 jobs since 2010. One of the things, before I get to the QCW tool, sorry, I kind of go on tangents. One of the things to keep in mind when you're looking at these types of charts is there's a lot going on behind this static graph. So for instance, in manufacturing, there's a lot of different types of jobs in manufacturing. It's not all the dirty, dark, dangerous assembly line types of jobs that are in manufacturing anymore. A lot of these jobs are evolving. Technology and automation, like I mentioned before, is impacting this industry quite a bit. And so if you were to visit a lot of manufacturing companies, plants, organizations, whatever it may be throughout the metro area in the state of Minnesota, you actually might be surprised at how high tech, how clean, how cool the opportunities are within this industry sector, the rooms for advancement within this industry sector, and then the educational requirements. There's a lot of jobs that don't require any formal education on through advanced degrees, and just the ABCs, going from any job to a better job to a career, that's present right within the manufacturing industry sector. And so you're not going to get that type of information just by looking at this static stat here. From this slide here, you might just see that, oh, manufacturing is down quite a bit since the year 2000. So it must be experiencing a lot of weakness. But you really do have to dig in to see that there's a lot of demand. There's a lot of great opportunities amongst all the different that spectrum within this industry sector. Professional business services. So I know this presentation was to focus a lot on opportunities for those with a bachelor's degree or a graduate degree, those types of educational attainment levels. I will say across the spectrum, there's going to be jobs in every industry sector that require advanced degrees, bachelor's and above. I focused on professional business services here just for a second because this is one of those industries where the vast majority of these jobs do require advanced degrees. And I should mention too, professional business services. With these industries, you can break down to more specific industry sectors. So professional business services, that includes legal services, it includes architecture and engineering, and it includes computer systems design. So when you're thinking like a web developer or information security analyst or a software developer of applications or system software, when you're thinking of a civil engineer or an architect or a mechanical engineer or an electrical engineer, just across the board, those jobs are present within this industry sector. And just listing those occupations, yeah, you can probably tell that those are occupations that do require bachelor's degrees or master's degrees or professional degrees and doctorate degrees. And from this graph, you can probably see, just looking, taking a glance at it, this is an industry sector that it has experienced some recessions, the dot-com bubble, the Great Recession, of course, but since then, this industry sector has grown at about twice as fast as the total economy. So since, let's see here, since 1990, this industry sector has added 160,000 jobs in the state of Minnesota, and it's added 64,000 jobs, grown by 21% since 2010. So just a lot of growth within this industry sector. So a lot of opportunities out there across the metro, across the state of Minnesota. Financial activities, another industry sector that includes insurance, insurance carriers, and then real estate rental and leasing, another industry that these occupations are typically going to require higher levels of education. And then this is an industry that added 25,000 plus jobs since 2010, also growing a little bit faster than the total economy. And that's where you can, again, dig down into your local area and see where are those jobs, for instance, in financial activities. Where are they located? What are the businesses? Stuff like that. So again, that was CES, that was a survey. And then these next couple of slides are just showing some QCW data. So this is based again off that administrative data that we collect from the unemployment insurance program. And here, I'll just focus on a couple of things. One is healthcare and social assistance. You see at the very top, it's added by far the most jobs over the past 5 years of available data in the state of Minnesota. When you're looking at those jobs in healthcare, it's not just your typical nurses and physicians, things like that. There's a lot of different types of jobs within healthcare. It could be IT, it could be management, office and administrative support, janitorial services. So that's for every industry sector. There might be a lot of different types of jobs within each industry sector. But healthcare, it's just eye-opening. Healthcare has added 500,000, or it's added, again, like I said before, 100,000 jobs over the past 10 years. It's now about 500,000 jobs in the state of Minnesota. Out of Minnesota's 2.9 million jobs, it accounts for almost 1 in 5 jobs. So it's a very extensive, huge industry sector. And it actually just came from a healthcare panel at the Bloomington Career Force location. I should give a plug. Now, working for the state of Minnesota, we have about 50 Career Force locations that are throughout the state of Minnesota. So if you're a job seeker, or if you're a student that's considering looking for work, you're about to graduate, anybody really, you can go into these Career Force locations, get set up one-on-one with an employment counselor. They can work on you with your assessments, whether it's skills or interests, or just getting set up with doing cover letters, working on interviews, all that kind of stuff. So there's some really cool resources at the Career Force locations. Look like there's some questions here. Yeah. What industry is information? So you see information at the bottom. I do usually get questions too about, you know, if I'm showing a slide like this, looking at the strengths, looking at those that are at the very bottom, you do see information at the very bottom. I do get some misconceptions about information, thinking it might be IT related. There are certainly IT jobs within information, but when you break into the specific subsectors, one of the biggest ones within information is publishing industries. And so that is definitely an industry that is being impacted big time by things like the internet and just new technologies, smartphones, stuff like that, that's having a pretty big impact on publishing. And so that was a great question. Awesome. Does healthcare and social assistance include the med tech industry? Great question. The med tech industry, that's probably going to be actually more in manufacturing. There's a subsector in manufacturing called miscellaneous manufacturing, which is largely medical supplies and equipment manufacturing. So you're going to find a lot of those jobs within that subsector of manufacturing. And it's actually really interesting when you're looking at medical supplies and equipment manufacturing, where it's concentrated. It's highly concentrated in areas like Anoka County, northern Hennepin County, Ramsey County. And again, that's where you can probably start to think of what are those businesses that are located there then. But yeah, there might be some med tech industries that are within healthcare and social assistance too, but the vast majority, if I was to look into the data, I can do that for you going forward, I would suspect are in manufacturing. So here's, again, I was talking about those NAICS. We saw those 20 major NAICS. It's the North American Industrial Classification System. You don't need to remember that, but basically it's a way to organize different industries and study them and see how they're trending over time. And so with this list, and I apologize, I break the rules of PowerPoint all the time. This is way too much information. It's mainly for myself. I was a history major, remember. But yeah, it's cool to see the data just speak for itself. And so with this, we're looking at slightly more in-depth industry sectors. And so in Minnesota, the largest growing over the past 5 years of available data, the very top, you see professional, scientific, and technical services. Again, architecture and engineering, computer systems design, so a lot of IT jobs are highly concentrated within this industry sector. And you see that the job growth, 18,000 plus jobs over the past 5 years, and over 160,000 jobs now, almost 161,000 in the state of Minnesota. So it's just, if you've got that bachelor's degree, if you've got an IT background, if you're interested in those types of careers, it's really encouraging to see that this is that industry sector that has gained the most jobs in the state of Minnesota over the past 5 years. You're seeing a lot of healthcare on this list: ambulatory healthcare services, social assistance, and hospitals. Those are 3 of the 4 healthcare subsectors, the 4th being nursing and residential care facilities, which we're not too far off the mark with that one from this top 10 list. Specialty trade contractors, that's going to be your electricians, plumbers, carpenters. These are jobs that typically do not require 4-year degrees, but I should mention, I guess I'm stealing some thunder from later on. One of the things that we're really starting to see in the data, and employers are telling us this too, is that formal education is very important, yes. We definitely see when we're looking at the data that there's a high correlation between higher education and higher wages. But one of the things that also is a big indicator of success is the degree or the major that you choose. And definitely go for those degrees and majors that you enjoy. I did a history degree again. If you're looking at the outcomes for history degrees, and I've got a slide on this later, I believe, the typical outcome for a history completer 2 years after completing that program in the state of Minnesota from a 4-year college is working in retail trade, earning less than $15 an hour. And so you might be thinking, with the cost of college, how's that line up then for success going forward? I will mention that if we were measuring by coolness factor, history would be at the very top. And the tool isn't meant to be used as projections, how things will be going forward, but that is looking at, how have students been doing in the past so far with this type of degree. One of the things that we're seeing though, again, with the degree that you choose, for instance, looking at specialty trade contractors, if you were to choose a certificate or a 2-year degree or a career and technical education, looking at apprenticeships or things like that, just kind of more lean, agile, no pun intended, types of programs, you'll see that their outcomes are at or even above sometimes 4-year programs. So a lot of it depends on, the motivation that you put into it and the interest that you have for sure, but also just seeing what is the demand in the labor market, what are employers looking for in this really tight labor market. So we can continue with that going forward. Call me up and we can have some conversations, or I should give one more plug. Last plug, I promise. My office has 2 publications. So we have a quarterly publication, Trends. So there it is. And we also have a monthly publication called Employment Review. And so if you never want to hear from me again, or if you don't want to look into our data tools at all, and I'll quickly mention, you can find all our data tools at min.gov/deed. So it's mn.gov/DEED. If you don't want to look into the data tools yourself, check out our publications. You can find them online there as well, or reach out to me and I'll connect you with them. But yeah, you'll find that we keep our eye on a lot of those hot topics within those publications. And if you have any feedback, positive or negative, or if you want to look us us to look into any certain area, we can certainly do that within these 2 publications. My son is considering getting a BS in sports management. It's a solid choice. So I don't want to make any like yes or no decisions for the future of your kids or anybody that's listening here today. But I think, you know, I was mentioning about different career pathways and different outcomes when we're looking at different award levels and just the degree itself. I do think, you know, the motivation, the essential skills or soft skills that you've got, if you're just reaching out, I think if you've got all that down, you'll be successful in almost any area that you go into. So I guess I can talk about the second story of Minnesota's labor market right now. We are seeing fluctuations, yes, but we're still seeing really high demand too. And I'll just skip forward. I think we're actually getting close to 40 minutes too. I'll skip forward to, look at this great data here, the tight labor market. So this is the second story, and it's getting to your question on that BS in sports management. I think, sports management. Right here, we see that we have 146,000 plus job vacancies in the state of Minnesota. That's the most vacancies we've ever had. And this is a survey based off of 11,000 employers twice a year. And we've been doing this, as you see here, since 2001. So it's the most vacancies we've ever had. And when you're breaking it down by industry sector, there's vacancies everywhere. Of course, healthcare makes up the bulk of those. And there's industries like accommodation, food services, and retail trade. They have a lot of turnover. And they just make out a huge chunk of Minnesota's economy. So there's gonna be a lot of vacancies there. But like manufacturing there, that's 7.6%. That represents over 11,000 vacancies. And so there's demand in almost every single industry. I'll just say it, there's demand in every industry in the state of Minnesota, in almost every occupation. And so if you have that drive, if you've got the educational background, but more so if you've got that those soft essential skills that employers are looking for in today's labor market, you'll be successful. And so for, your son going in BS in sports management, you can definitely reach out to me. I can look up the vacancies, the wages, the projections, the educational attainment, businesses, things like that. But overall, I think if he or she is motivated, they'll, and has that experience that they're looking for, making those connections, they'll be successful. It's min.gov/deed. So mn.gov/DEED. And you can actually see it in the upper right here. This one leads to the JVS tool, but that's where you can find our information. Question here, why is it that in an ongoing tight labor market, sellers market has not led to higher wages? So that is something that we have actually been scratching our heads at too within the Labor Market Information Office, why we haven't seen over this decade of employment growth, higher wage growth in the state of Minnesota and the United States. Some of it you could maybe point to, there's still some slack in the labor market. You know, I mentioned we have 3.3% unemployment in the state of Minnesota. I have been called a liar when I say that before, and I guess I am omitting certain truths. There's 3 measurements of unemployment above that. There's the U4 level discouraged workers, U5 marginally attached workers, U6 part-time underemployed workers. When you add all those folks into that measurement of unemployment, we have about 6% unemployment in the state of Minnesota. So you could point to some slack in the labor market. But again, we have less than 1 unemployed person for every vacancy with this tight labor market in this graph that you saw here. So I don't think that's the whole story. And we are really trying to reach out to employers and hear from them directly on wages. What's going on here with wage growth? The encouraging thing is that within the past year with this job vacancy survey, and I can go to this chart right here, one of the things that we saw, we have the highest wages we've ever had. And you can't really tell from this graph, but the highest we've ever had for those jobs requiring no formal education at 1243, a high school diploma or GED at 1462, and for vocational training at 1871. Another fun fact is that wages increased by far the most over the year for those jobs that require vocational training or awards, career and technical education, things like that. Those wages increased over the year, these median wage offers, by 10%. For those jobs requiring a high school diploma or equivalent, wages increased for those jobs, the median wage offer over the year by 4.3%. And then for the total of all occupations, they increased by 3.2% with that median wage offer. Of course, you have to consider inflation and things like that, but I do think, if you're gonna ask my opinion, if this tight labor market continues, if our aging of the population continues, I do think wages we'll continue to see those wage increases going forward, and I think they will increase. But, you know, barring any recession that might happen, we'll continue to keep an eye on wage growth and wage trends. And that's definitely something that you could reach out to me for. Okay, so this is kind of the summary then of the educational stuff. I was really supposed to like focus in on education. It really is interesting when you are looking at education and the jobs and educational attainment in Minnesota's population, the metro's population. So looking at this chart here, this table, for instance, you'll see that in the state of Minnesota, and I've got these numbers here somewhere, yeah, more than 35%, so more than 1 in 3 Minnesotans have a bachelor's degree or more. In the metro area, 43.7%, so more than 2 in 5 metro area residents have a bachelor's degree or more. If you're looking at that kind of circular chart thing, then you'll see that in the metro area, a little over 1 in 4 jobs require a bachelor's degree or more. So there is a bit of a disconnect between educational attainment and requirements for jobs in the metro area in the state of Minnesota. And so that's really interesting when you're looking at what are employers looking for, what are they putting for minimum and preferred requirements on their applications for their jobs, and then having those conversations about, you know, we're actually looking for experience, or we're looking for those skill sets that we really need for these jobs today, just because the labor market is so tight. So that's why I do think, you know, as a regional analyst, I've kind of seen this firsthand, almost this proliferation of different types of pathways that job seekers can take and students can take, again, be more agile and lean. For instance, the boot camps that are here with the College of Continuing Education at the University of Minnesota, the boot camps, the certifications, the different kind of even like one-day programs or learning experiences that you can get, put that on your resume, get that experience, and that'll definitely go a long way when employers are really looking for workers. So I think that's going to continue going forward. Again, when you're looking at this chart, you do see that high correlation between bachelor's degrees, advanced degrees, and higher wages. But like I mentioned before, major matters too. So picking that degree or that correct that area where we're seeing really high demand and high wage growth, I think that's going to have a huge impact going forward too. So we have just kind of finishing up with a couple of slides here. We do have a lot of different data tools. This is one of them. We have 2 tools that are really great for, I think, job seekers, students going forward, trying to get a sense of what are those occupations in demand, what are the wages and the education required. This is one of those tools. It's the occupations in demand tool. We're actually working on kind of reworking the layout of the tool, but I think it'll be pretty exciting seeing what happens there. But it's still exciting going to this tool and getting that list of, and you can break it down by region. What is the most in-demand job from the least in-demand job? And you can break it down by education and wages as you see here. So you can just get a quick sense of what are those different pathways that I could take, or those different types of transitions I can make if I'm looking to continue being successful in the state of Minnesota, if I just want to try out a new area. So occupations in demand is one. We also have a career and education explorer tool. So you can go into there. So from like this list here, we can maybe see that machinists with a post-secondary award or associate degree are making over $54,000 a year. I want to learn more about machinists. So then you can head on over to the career and education explorer tool. Look at machinists in particular. You can actually see then job openings that businesses have. You can see those educational institutions, you know, that are offering programs to become a machinist. So that's a great resource. And I'll just mention one more too. Career One Stop. I would also check out Career One Stop for career exploration. They also have skills assessments, interest assessments. They're working on career videos and industry videos. So beyond the data, it's really cool to just see what are these jobs like on the day-to-day. And that is something that you can get from careeronestop.org. So I think, were there a couple questions here? And we're at 12:48, so we got a little bit more time for questions and such, and I'll finish up with just a little bit on graduate employment outcomes. But one of the questions here is, are these salaries average overall for this role or average starting salary? So I believe we were talking about this occupations in demand chart. The figures that I put here are for the metro area, and these are median wages. And I got that median wage information. We combine a lot of our data tools into one for this occupations in demand tool. The wage information, if you want to look up wages, starting wages, median wages, 90th percentile wages, for any occupation, we track over 800 occupations. That is within our occupational employment statistics tool. It's actually one of our tools that has probably a more clunky name to it. We apologize. But it's a great tool. There are other salary surveys out there. You know, if you were to Google search salary survey, you'd probably run into a bunch of them. I believe this is the top hit on Google if you do Google search for salary survey in Minnesota, but it's the occupational employment statistics. I guess I'm being biased. I think it's the best one out there. And I do say that too with in mind that it's the same methodology that the Bureau of Labor Statistics uses. So you can look up wages in Minnesota or its regions, compare it to like Wisconsin or Iowa or the US as a total, and you can know that the methodology is the exact same. So yes, this is median wages for the metro area, and it's based off of a survey, of course, but it's one of the largest surveys of its kind. It's a combination of 6 different samples, so it's 3 years of data, and that's to get rid of some of that sampling and non-sampling error that you might run into with surveys. So again, some of the most accurate data that you can get for wages. And yeah, if you just Google, or not Google search, but it's mn.gov/deed/OES, so occupational employment statistics. And then here, one more question. College grad, when age discrimination is. Looks like it's on age with employers and things like that. I should just mention a lot of the data that we do have on age. And when you're looking at information, for instance, from the American Community Survey or from our graduate employment outcomes tool, all of this data, we go by confidentiality. So if it's the QCW tool and employers are reporting data to us, all of that data is confidential. You can't get business information from that data. If you're looking at American Community Survey information, all that information is confidential. And the employment information is going to include those that are 16 years of age and older. And then, of course, when you're looking at things like graduate employment outcomes, this is the last tool I'll talk about. I'm probably overwhelming everybody. I apologize again. But the graduate employment outcomes tool, it's a collaboration between the Office of Higher Education, and they grab social security numbers of students while they're at any institution, including the University of Minnesota and St. Olaf College. And then we grab social security numbers through the unemployment insurance program. And so we can longitudinally link up how are students doing from educational institutions in the state of Minnesota, looking at different programs, different graduation years, so on and so forth. How are they doing 2 through 8 years after they've completed those programs in terms of employment, what industry they're working in, and what they're earning as a wage. So it's really excellent data. And again, I should also mention, this is very confidential too. With those social security numbers, of course, very big emphasis on keeping this data private. So this is just aggregated information. In fact, with classes that have less than 10 students, we'll just wipe out all that data. So it's very confidential stuff, but very powerful data when you're looking at it. So here's just kind of a quick glance at 2016 completers. How are they doing 2 years after they've completed those programs? The light blue is certificate completers, the medium blue is associate degree completers, and the dark blue is bachelor degree completers. And I'll let you guys look at this data in these slides more in depth later on. You know, I do actually 3-hour training sessions, so let me know if you want to attend one of those. I tell you how to use all these tools in concert with one another. So I could talk about this stuff for a really long time and show this data for a really long time. But this is just a taste of, you know, some bachelor degree outcomes for different instructional programs. So you do see history there. I feel like I can hit that one a little bit because I was a history completer, but do keep in mind, this isn't a projections tool. So even if you get a history degree, for instance, in this tool, we're not going to report, let's say that you went off to higher education. So that won't be reported in here unless you did find a job later on with that higher education. Another thing that we can't report is, let's say you got a history degree and then you want to become a lawyer, like in Washington, DC or Chicago, or you moved out state. We can't report on that data yet either. But I do believe the Bureau of Labor Statistics is working on a national graduate employment outcomes tool similar to ours. So stay tuned for that. And then we can also look at graduate degree outcomes. So there's just a lot of information. Again, if I was to summarize, we've seen employment trends, we've seen unemployment statistics. We've looked at the job vacancy survey and the tight labor market in the state of Minnesota. What's going on with wage growth? What's going on with different education and what employers are looking for? What kind of experiences and skills are they looking for? And then we also took a look quick at some graduate employment outcomes and some occupations in demand. And so I think just the summary of all this stuff is that there's a lot of data that we collect. we do a really good job of keeping that information private and confidential. And it's really powerful stuff that a lot of different types of audiences can use, whether you're a student that's looking to look at career pathways going forward, what kind of education should I go for? Or if you're a student that's about to graduate and going into the job market soon, if you're a job seeker that's looking to transition between jobs, or if you're an economic development agency, workforce development board, city or local government, this information is for everybody. And so I think that one of the main purposes of this presentation was, yeah, give a little bit of a sense for what's happening in Minnesota's economy, but also that our resources are available. I work very closely actually with the University of Minnesota. I help out quite a bit with the College of Continuing Education, looking at kind of the heartbeat of what's going on with programming here and how does it relate to demand in the labor market. So that's just one example, but yeah, there's a lot of different ways where you can use this information to help out with whatever endeavor that you're looking into. So I'll close just with, yep, we've got a lot of resources. Check us out on our main website or our 2 publications. And then this is a quick example, and I do have the URL here, so that's nice. We have that question on the wages. The URL is right there for this occupational employment statistics information. And then there's a hyperlink here for our cost of living calculator. So it's kind of cool to look at the combination of those 2 data tools. There's the URLs for our publications. There's a helpline that we have. Call us up. There's a live person that will talk to you. Might be me. And then you can reach out to me anytime as well. So are there any more questions that were on there? Yeah, so with that, thank you very much for listening, and we'll see if we have some questions, and I'll let Rebecca close out here in just a second. But there's 2 questions. So quick, what does this look like across race and immigration? I can't remember what that was referring to, but we do, I'll just mention this. We are definitely looking at immigration data. We're looking at employment barriers and disparities. We're looking at just population growth across the state of Minnesota, what's going on with education too. For instance, with the graduate employment outcomes data, we break that down by race and ethnicity, looking at educational outcomes. So that is a very important topic to keep an eye on. And it's something that's, when you're looking at demographics in the state of Minnesota or the metro area, actually just helped out, a quick plug for myself. In the Star Tribune, I think it was yesterday or the day before, I was helping out with some information on minority populations in the metro area grew by 50% over the past decade. For the total population, I believe it was about 17%. And so we're becoming a much more diverse state across the state of Minnesota. So we definitely keep an eye on that kind of information. Yes, you can have my PowerPoint. So here's my information. You can email me or you can email Rebecca, and she'll send that out to everybody. So that's great. And then all the programs that, let's see, all those programs look like they might be heavily male dominated in the blue. Is that right? They were all blue. But yeah, no, it's actually, that's something else that I'll lastly mention here, I guess, too. I've got some slides. I blurred over the slides that looked at education and the shifts that were seen, or not education, age. So we could look at shifts in age for different occupations and industries over time. And you can look at that for occupational or education areas too. And then you can also look at industries and occupations by male and female, so gender, and also race and ethnicity. So you are definitely right. When you're looking at some of these areas, like in manufacturing and construction, they are male dominated. Construction, for instance, overall, I think it's about 95% white male workers. So that's something that employers and education, K-12, post-secondary, that's something that trying to get more women interested in construction, because when you're looking at, for instance, the median wage of an electrician is $85,000 a year. These are opportunities that we should have everybody interested in. So how can we get people interested in those areas that they might not be interested in, or that a lot of people just aren't pushing them in that direction? We should have all of these different areas, whether it's manufacturing and construction, open for women, or when you're looking at healthcare, nursing, for instance. You see nursing on this slide. Registered nursing is about 90% female. So how can we get more men interested in registered nursing? So I think from these slides, from this data, you can come up with a lot of different types of conversations and look into a lot of different endeavors. And I'll end on that, I think, but yeah, definitely reach out if you have any questions. And with that, thank you. And here's Rebecca to close things out.
Yes. Thank you so much, Tim. This was very informative and very helpful. And I think it's definitely complementary to one's job search as possibly potential career seekers that are out there.
Yep.
But I think something else to keep in mind is also a matter of thinking about having an awareness of your own skills, knowledge, and abilities, and where those sort of interests lie, as well as complementing that with related experiences. And if you're a student thinking about volunteering or other ways to gain transferable skills to student organizations, related work opportunities, or internship opportunities. If you're a student at the University of Minnesota, feel free to go to career.umn.edu. There you will find information about your Career Center on campus, and you're definitely welcome to visit your Career Center here on campus or visit with the Career Force as well. And any others who might be enrolled in other institutions, feel free to visit your university's website and check out the career centers that are available at your institutions as well. So I think combining different resources will definitely help give you a good grounding in terms of what to expect when going into the job market. So thank you for tuning in today. I will be sending an email to you with the recording of this webinar as well as a survey. We'd love to have your feedback. In that survey, we'll be asking you for additional topical ideas that you might have for future webinars. So feel free to fill that out and send that back to me. So I'll be getting that out to you within the next day or so. Thank you.